And thank you, Kristen and everyone for attending tonight. We are really excited to tell you about this project and get your feedback. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Water Environment Services. We're a wastewater and stormwater special district. We serve large portions of the Clackamas, of the urban area in Clackamas County, and we produce clean water and protect water quality. That's what we do. We operate and maintain 5 water resource recovery facilities, 23 pumping stations, over 350 miles of pipe in the urbanized area. And each year we clean more than 7 billion gallons of wastewater while converting waste into electricity and natural fertilizer. Our job is really to ensure that our community enjoys safe and healthy water. And our surface water management team, some of the folks you've met tonight, we provide water quality protection for the communities that we serve by implementing programs to reduce pollution discharge to rivers and streams and wetlands caused by urban stormwater runoff. And through our watershed protection and planning work, we take a long-term approach to protecting the health of our shared waters. We work in the Kellogg Mount Scott Creek watersheds, Johnson Creek, and in portions of the Clackamas and Tualatin River watersheds are where we do most of our surface water management work. Watershed health is certainly something that we take seriously, and we are in the beginning stages of this exciting new project, and we want your input. Before we get going, I would like to take a moment to thank our leaders that are in attendance tonight for their interest and support in making projects like this happen. Our director, Greg Geist, is on the call. Our advisory committee for WES chair, Diana Helm, is here. We have Clackamas County Commissioners Paul Savas and Mark Scholl, and Milwaukee Councilor Kathy Heisey, who are all interested in the project and here tonight to learn along with the rest of you all. So we thank you all for your support. If there are others on the call and I've missed you from the registration list, please type your name into the chat so we can recognize you for other elected officials. So let's talk about Three Creeks. This is a site map. It's a proximity map for the Three Creeks area, just to sort of let you know where we are. Again, this is in the heart of our service area. The site is from a jurisdiction standpoint bordered on the north and west by Milwaukee, and the rest of the area surrounding the site is unincorporated Clackamas County, including a little bit of Happy Valley is just not too far away, right over on the other side of the freeway. Next slide, please. So the site itself, there's a few things we want to point out. One, the Three Creeks. The Three Creeks that converge on the site are in the lower right portion of the slide. Those are Phillips Creek coming in the northern part under 213 or 82nd Avenue, and then Mount Scott Creek and Dean Creek come together just south of the railroad tracks and then flow into the site and converge. All 3 of the creeks flow through the site. A feature I would like to point out is the water control structure that was built in the early 2000s by Clackamas County to reduce some peak flood flows. That's in the western portion of the site. There are transportation systems that border the site. Like I said, 213 to the east, Harmony Road along the north, and then a railroad on the UP Railroad that runs along the southern portion of the site. So it really is bound. This natural area is bound by those important transportation systems. And then the facilities noted on the map as well. The North Clackamas Parks and Rec District, North Clackamas Aquatic Park, and the Clackamas Community College Harmony Campus are neighbors to the north. The feature, there are many natural features to the site that I think you'll hear about tonight, but I just want to recognize as well this strong community interest in this site. There's a long history of grassroots stewardship, taking care of this site, and people are responsible for the relatively good shape that it's in today. And many of you are here tonight at the meeting, so thank you for your efforts. Next slide, Kristen. Yeah, so let's start with what we're trying to do there. Like I said, this site offers a lot of potential for us sorry, I'm trying to close the poll. A lot of potential for us, has a lot of things going for it, and you know, some real opportunities for improvement. When we started this project, it's more of an exploration of what's out there, and where do we have opportunities to improve water quality, improve habitat, improve function on the site. And so our major project goals heading into it, as we explore the possibilities, are really improving water quality, not only, you know, water at the site, but the site's ability to help Mount Scott Creek, which is a part of the Kellogg Creek watershed, and joins Kellogg Creek not too far downstream of the site, to improve water quality for those waterways. Stream enhancement, habitat itself, you'll hear about that, and trying to make improvements there. Downstream flood reduction, you know, we know there are certainly issues with property flooding, not only downstream but upstream of the site, and to the extent that we can, and that's a, you know, sort of a big if, to the extent that we can try and maximize the site's ability to help retain some floodwaters and try and reduce some flood elevations for ranges of storms, and then, as I said, habitat for you know, threatened and endangered salmon and steelhead, as well as other critters like you can see here on the slide. So those are the overarching goals. Next slide, please. And then there are other considerations that are also very important, and we're hearing that. We'll share some of the feedback we're hearing from our stakeholders later, but, you know, really protecting and avoiding any adverse impacts to important natural features on the site. Like I said, the site's got a lot going for it, and we don't want to lose some things to gain some things, so we have to be mindful of those constraints. We need to be mindful of how the flood reduction facility on the site works, and the fact that it backs up water on the site. So there is standing water during big storms, and that's a constraint. Offsite impacts, like we talked about, from flooding and whatnot. Permitting constraints, something our permitting team is working on to make sure that whatever we want to do, we can actually get permits for. And then we're hearing a lot about and are thinking hard about public access and opportunities for the community to be able to enjoy the site for passive recreation, for walking, for wildlife, and for environmental education. We're hearing a lot about the need for potential facilities for environmental education on the site. And so, again, to the extent feasible, we're looking at those options as well.
Okay, so we talked a bit about some of the considerations when we're doing the design work and doing the enhancement, the stream and water quality and floodplain enhancements. And there are a number of important features on the site that are under consideration as we're doing so. And we start by featuring the things that are shown in white here, which are the Oregon white oak hammocks that are out throughout the site. Those are certainly a critical element that we want to preserve and protect as we're doing any of the work that we're describing. There are other unique habitat features and plant features and so on. Also point out that you've seen this picture before, but where the stream runs through the site, there are also some considerations around other habitat types. There is a mitigation site on the site that we need to avoid. There are other ownerships, and then the area you might see in the blue hatching and so on as a floodplain. So that's another important consideration. So these are all things that are elements that we will and are considering in developing the preferred alternatives for working on the site and for the flood control and water quality. So we've been talking about this as a flood control facility and so on, and there is an existing flood control structure on the site. And I would like to give you a quick introduction to what it looks like. It's hard to see when you're on the site, but basically it consists of a berm or a dam-like structure across the stream and the stream's floodplain. And in this picture, you're seeing that the flows run from the upper right to the lower left. We have this structure that's built across the stream, and there is a culvert that is located through the structure that allows water all the time to flow through the structure. So it's a low flow bypass structure. Once the water starts building up during a big storm, it actually has to rise to a certain level that it engages in these flood control gates. And these flood control gates will move and operate according to how much water is coming into the system. And so once the big system starts coming in, the big rain starts coming in, it starts to fill up behind the berm and inundate a large area of the Three Creeks site. When the storm is over, the gates reopen, and then all the water will continue to run out of the facility, and it'll gradually lower. Usually the water levels stay in there for on the order of hours and maybe a day, but not for longer time periods than that. So when the flooding does occur, the flood control structure that we were just looking at right here backs the water up onto the site. And this purple and gold area that are shown here, areas shown here, give you an idea of what the extent of the flood pool would be during the maximum of the flood control facility. This represents a couple of different stages that the water may reach during regular flooding. Once it reaches this level, if it's a bigger storm than the design storm for the facility, it overflows the dam and continues to run downstream. So in exploring what there are options were for enhancing the stream there, one of the most significant issues that we see on the creek is what's significant erosion and down cutting or downward movement of the stream, which is really an important impact to the stream, because what it does is starts to disconnect the stream from its floodplains. So as you can see here, if the stream is way down in this channel here and it's carved this channel, it's not able, when the water comes up, to overflow in its floodplain. Floodplains provide a lot of important flood management and water quality elements to the system. So reconnecting with the floodplain is really an important consideration of the project, of the stream restoration part of the project, and consequently the flood control and the water quality elements. So we've evaluated a number of alternatives for what sorts of restoration should be considered or could be considered, and we've arrived at this as being the preferred alternative, which is to actually raise the stream channel bottom back up to its historic levels, so that as it fills up and as it floods during larger events, it can re-flood the floodplain that's adjacent to it. So by doing this, we don't have to do any grading out in the floodplain. We're just using the floodplain that always existed there. And in addition to that, we're considering other possible habitat improvements, such as side channels or maybe some backwater channels that would be located out in some of the open areas on the site as additional habitat for fish and other wildlife. The way this will look if you look at another view in the section view, you can see here that the channel is down cut, or it's eroded into the land, and we would fill that material back in and restore the stream to its more historic flood elevation. If we do some of the side channels, we would locate them at about the same levels as the stream. So during floods, the water could flow through the main channel and through some of these side channels in the wintertime. To get an idea what this will look like, this is the picture on the right is another shot of Mount Scott Creek in its existing condition. You can see this down cutting or this erosion that's gone on in these high banks. So what we would do, this is an example of another project that's in the similar scale and has a similar approach to what we're proposing for the raising of the stream bed bottom, is to refill the channel with appropriate stream materials and stream gravels, add wood and wood debris, add other debris that would basically makes this a matrix of a natural stream channel and so on, to hold everything in place and to reestablish that a new stream channel bottom, and then consequently reflood the floodplain when the bigger storms occur. So this is a picture of that same stream after the water was introduced, but right after it was built. So this is kind of what it would start looking like after when the project's done. It's in about the same scale as you can see from the shot on the right, but this is before the plants start to grow in. And after a few years, this is what the stream can look like and so on. So it's reestablished its natural elevation, and then once it's flooding, it can spill over into its floodplain within the facility. I mentioned some of the side channel potential and so on. This is the open area that exists out in the Three Creeks natural area. So one of the options is to look at adding these side channels, or adding some backwater habitat, or doing other wood placement or other infill plantings or other elements that we call microhabitats that would make this area a little bit more complex and add additional habitat to the facility. So Gail will come on and start talking about what we've been hearing from you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. What we've been hearing. So since summertime, we've had an online survey that's been open. We've received about 150 responses so far, or to date. I guess the survey closed today. We've also had some small group discussions with various stakeholder groups and have talked to about 30 people in that way. And so far, we have heard strong support for all of our stated project goals. So stream health, water quality, habitat, trying to reduce downstream flooding. We've also heard some questions and concerns about the topics you see here. People are wanting to make sure we avoid impacts to some of those special habitats we talked about, the Oregon white oaks and some others. Also avoiding habitats to fish that migrate through the site. We've also heard concerns and questions about whether it might be possible to help reduce some of the upstream flooding that occurs. This area is just pretty low lying all around. And so, yeah, the flooding issues are not just downstream. And then also questions about temporary construction impacts and making sure that we minimize those. And then we also hear that people have an interest and would like us to keep exploring options for making sure we can continue or improve, even enhance the amount of environmental education that we do on the site, to put some interpretive signs out so that people can get a better understanding of what's on the site. People are really interested in opportunities for pedestrian access. But to have that pedestrian access in a way that limits the impacts to habitat. And people also are interested in having us explore how to address the unauthorized camping that we sometimes find on the site and issues of safety, not only related to the camping, but also the railroad and the train that goes right through the site.
Great, thank you. So yeah, we are still in the planning phases of the project. And we're certainly starting to hone in on what we think is realistic for the site and attainable when it comes to the various project goals. So through the rest of this year, we're continuing to do our public involvement, stakeholder input, our listening to make sure that we're hearing from people about what we should try and accomplish later this year or early next year. Actually, we want to schedule some time with our county commissioners to continue to update them on the project. And then moving forward into design in 2022 and 23, continuing community engagement, starting the permitting process, and starting to nail down our plans. A big part of that, I think, in 2022 and 23, and part of the community conversation is going to be, talking about, again, what we think we can accomplish and how we can accomplish that with the funding that's available. There's a lot of possibility at this site, maybe more than we even thought initially. And so our initial budget was $3.5 to $4 million for all of the components, including the stream restoration and looking at optimizing the flood reduction facility and trying to potentially provide some public access, but that funding will run out pretty quickly. So we're certainly looking for outside funding sources to be able to scale up the things that we're doing on the site and maybe look at other options to try and accomplish some of our goals, including things like FEMA funding, for example, which we're talking about now. So that's going to be all part of the planning process in 22 and 23, and then hoping to get things rolling out there in 2024. That's where we're headed next.
Great. So we have been collecting some questions in the Q&A box, but now is the time to start getting questions in there. If you are going to have any, we'll open that up and we'll go through those and have the team field them. And then it's covering the link. If we can't get to all the questions today, or we can't get a very thorough answer, we will type them up and we'll get them onto the website also. So I've posted the website there. And then we will give you a comment form. If you have a longer comment that would be easier for you to do offline outside of the meeting, that we can submit them that way too. So I'm going to open up the Q&A box, and let's go ahead and take the screen off, but maybe have it at the ready, Paul, in case we need the maps for any questions or answers. And so the panelists all have access to these questions, but I'm going to go ahead and read them and then send them over to team members to answer. This project is a tremendous opportunity to restore floodplain habitat for native migratory fish species, several of which are ESA listed. The project can also help to increase flood storage capacity, which is an ongoing challenge in the area. The question is, how can the project be designed to ensure listed fish species do not become trapped in areas that may be isolated from Mount Scott Creek for long periods of time? This may be particularly important for areas that may receive stormwater inputs after higher winter flows recede.
All right, Vince, you want to answer that one for us?
Yeah, I can answer that. I think part of the conceptual design is having the secondary channels in some of the wetland areas connected to Mount Scott Creek, so that when you do have flooding events, and especially when the structure becomes engaged in backing up water into the floodplain, that fish do have refuge areas to protect themselves in, and then have access back to Mount Scott Creek when those floodwaters recede.
Okay. Next question: How has the site hydrology, groundwater conditions been considered in the design development for available flood storage and water quality, especially temperature?
Either
Yeah,
Paul
our
or
expert.
Vince.
I can start out on that one.
Okay.
It's a good question. So because Mount Scott Creek right now is incised, so eroded down like 6 to 8 feet deep, that affects the local groundwater around the creek. So in a very natural condition, the creek would only be a foot or so deep, right? And so that keeps your groundwater elevations higher as the bottom of the creek is higher. With it being like 8 feet deep, then the groundwater close to the creek depresses because it wants to go into the creek at that lower level. So as you get farther away from the creek, maybe some of the groundwater elevations are higher, but the creek is depressing the local groundwater elevations. And that directly affects the type of vegetation that grows in the floodplain. So instead of having nice hydrophytic or water-loving plants that should be around the creek, you start getting drier upland species, which should not be around your creek and your riparian zone. And then that also allows for more non-native invasive species to invade those areas because they grow better in those drier conditions. So if you have more natural wet conditions, it's better for your native vegetation.
Okay. Melanie's an expert in that area too. So if she has more comments, Melanie, feel free to email the team too. We had a question in the chat. Let me ask it. It's how does this dam influence the flooding on Lake Road properties?
Either Paul or Ron, do you want to address that one?
Well, I guess I'll start it here is that the existing facility and the way it's operating right now, because of the nature of having the gates for when bigger flows come in there and the ability to store floodwater and so on, it does reduce flooding downstream. The extent to which it reduces it depends in large part on the type of the storm, whether it's a big fast one or a really long storm that has a big peak in it, and then how the structure and the gates respond to that. So it does provide some benefits. The benefits are fairly limited. The design is approximately addresses about a 7-year storm as it exists right now. So our main approach to looking at optimizing the facility is to try to get more out of what's already there. We're not intending to add any storage to the facility and so on, but I think that there's some actions that can be taken that'll improve the way the thing operates and the way it stores water, and to either reduce the magnitude or the the frequency of flooding, at least for the kind of small and middle-sized storms.
Next question, have you made a list of native plants that are in the Three Creeks natural area?
That's an excellent question. I'll let Gail field that one.
Sure. Yes, we've done some surveys of the plants that are out there, and we have a pretty good feel for what's on site. Along the hillside where we have most of the Oregon white oaks, we know that's a really important feature to protect. We've also actually noticed a madrone in that location too, so we know we have at least one of those. And then in the wetland areas, we've got a lot of wetland plants. We have some areas of camas that are growing that we want to protect. And then of course in the riparian zone, we do have a lot of the plants that you would expect to see there, really thanks to a lot of the volunteers that have planted those things over the years. So we've got some Oregon ash, some areas of cedar trees, more Oregon white oak along the riparian area as well, and several other species of small trees and shrubs. Also herbaceous species, we've got, I guess other than the camas, we do know that we have a lot of weed populations out there at the herbaceous layer, and we have that mapped as well.
Great. Was fish passage through the water control structure assessed? Are any retrofits for passage being considered in the design?
I'll let Paul answer, but I will just start by saying we are in conversations with ODF&W about the project. We're still really early in the design, so we don't have a ton of details on that, but I will let Paul tell you what we do know.
So we have looked at existing fish passage, and then we know that the project as it's proposed for the flood optimization won't change that. It'll act the same way. But right now there is as I mentioned earlier, the low flow bypass channel. So there is a culvert that does direct the stream around the structure, and the water level has to build up, and it starts to engage the floodplain, engage the flood control structure at some events larger than about around the 2 to 5 year flood range. So most of the activity of the passage of water and then the consequent passage of fish is occurring through the existing structure. There's really two or three important considerations. One is that culvert inundated all the time, and because of the existing conditions that are out there that we would not plan to change, it is inundated at all times, or as all the times that we've observed it and seen it. The second is that what are the velocities of water that go through the structure during the peak events, or during some of the larger events like the 2-year, the channel forming events and so on. And we've demonstrated what the velocities are, and they're in the range of passable, but we're still considering, what those are, and trying to determine what the actual, if it is the barrier or partial barrier. As far as mitigations for that, the main thing we would work on is that ensuring that the conditions that are there in place right now, as far as the inundation of the culvert and so on, would remain in place. And would, again, as Leah mentioned, working with ODFW to determine if there are any other mitigating things we can apply to that low flow culvert.
Okay. Next question. If the channel has incised, how will placed gravels be retained, protected from future incision? Is the stream bed material expected to be mobile or immobile? How much of the stream bed material gradation might be suitable for salmonid spawning? That was a lot of words for me.
That's I'm sure that's one of my questions to answer. Yeah, so basically, how how will the play scales be retained? So that when we do these type of riffle structures to raise the bed up, we design the cobble or bed material, the new bed material, so that it's immobile, especially in these urban type systems. So because Mount Scott Creek, and Phillips Creek and Dean Creek all drain highly urbanized watersheds, most of your first order channels for small channels have been removed and piped. And so you're missing a lot of the natural bed material that would be transported down into Mount Scott Creek. I mean, because we don't have those materials anymore, you don't want to place materials in there that would be mobile because there's no upstream material to replace it. So we want to make sure we design it to be immobile, which is not the best thing, but at least it's still providing habitat for macroinvertebrates, so aquatic insects. And again, so because it's not mobile, then that keeps it from incising or down cutting in the future. How much of the stream bed material gradation might be suitable for spawning? That's a good question, not sure yet, but we have a great potential here because it's a low gradient system, so low slope. And also, as Paul was saying, you start engaging the flood reduction structure at like somewhere between a 2 and 5 year storm event. So you start getting on your larger flows, your really big flows, you start backing water up. So your velocities in your channel are getting close to zero when you're backing water up into the channel, right? And so you have the potential to use smaller materials and they'll still be immobile under those conditions. And so most likely, I'm optimistic that we can use the right gradation that would be some on as spawning material.
The question, Todd had a question about fish passage. I think we grabbed that already. And then also about the gravel mix and whether it was mobile. I think you feel like you got that fully, Vince.
Yeah, right. So that was a similar question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. To follow up on Todd's question about fish passage, Devin Simmons from ODOT has identified spawning gravels in Lower Phillips Creek. The same issue should be addressed with regard to Phillips Creek and Dean Creek. Okay.
Yeah, so the conceptual design right now, we're not touching Phillips Creek at all. It is in very good condition. It has some really nice gravel riffles on it, and so basically we would leave Phillips Creek alone. Do most of the work would be on Mount Scott Creek.
Okay. See, this is from Neil Schulman. Watersheds Council sees this project as a needed chance for restored stream function and flood abatement, with a lot of questions, such as Todd and Melanie's, to be addressed in the design. One of those is how to best achieve fish passage at the structure for all life stages and species. The structure was identified as a likely barrier by interfluve and LTAP restoration. I encourage Wes to continue working with ODF and W to find as many creative solutions as possible. Thanks for the comment. Liz, have you engaged with the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde in the design work?
No, we have not. I would be curious to get some more input on that.
We can do that. Thank you for that. Will large trees be logged to make new floodplain, or will open areas that are already there be used? Is there a size limit for trees to be cut down to make the area?
I'll have Paul start off the response on that one.
Yeah, there's part of the reason that the preferred alternatives was chosen was because it allows us to significantly minimize the number of trees that would need to be removed. So what we're doing is basically working mainly in the existing channel that's down cut, and then allowing the floodplain to reflood from that perspective rather than creating floodplain that would require some removal of trees. There may be a few select trees that would be lost in order to gain access to the site and to do some of the work, but the extent to which that would happen would be significantly minimized. There's no sense in cutting the trees down because that's really part of the habitat that we're trying to work with and restore.
Thanks, Paul. I have a question in the chat here. When this site was being considered for development by the newly created North Clackamas Park District in the early 90s, one of the issues that prohibited development was an area that was contaminated. At the time, there were concerns about removal of the contaminated materials impact to groundwater. How will this project address the contaminated site?
I can briefly kick that off. We have been in conversations with ODOT. If it's the same site, they are the owners of that contaminated site that is covered now by poplar trees, and this project will not use that site, so it won't touch that site, so we won't need to remove the trees or disturb the contaminated site. I don't know if anybody else wants to say more on that, but
all right, well, we just have a few more minutes, and we really appreciate everybody's time today and the questions. We will document all these questions and post them to the web. We will take this video recording and we will also post that to the web. And we will, there's a chat coming in. I'm going to turn it over to Ron to close us out for the meeting and do a final closeout for us and let everyone get on with their evenings. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Kristen. And again, thank you to everyone for attending. Your time is valuable, and especially your input. I think we got a lot of really good suggestions tonight, things to think about, some of which we were thinking about, some which we should be thinking about, and so we'll certainly do that. As you can see, you know, we are excited about this project. We know that there is a lot of opportunity on the site and a lot of demands, and so you know, there's opportunity for water quality, there's opportunity for potentially flooding, there's habitat, there's public access, and there will certainly be budget constraints at some point. We have primarily funding this project through our surface water funds that Water Environment Services collects from our service area. And as I said before, we have about $3.5 to $4 million budgeted to do this work. And so as we start to align what we can do, and we start to look at some of the other potential issues that we need to address, fish passage was obviously something that was a major focus of this evening, and is clearly something that we should address. But we will certainly have budget constraints, and so ultimately the conversation over the next planning and design phase will certainly be balanced by what we can afford. And as I said earlier, you know, we are certainly seeking outside funding sources, and any ideas that people have where we should look for money, that would be great. We're certainly listening. We have some ideas of our own, but we'll try and do the best that we can with the funding that's available, and that'll be an important conversation further down the road. But we are excited, and we appreciate the community's interest and excitement in the work that we're doing, and the work that we can do at Three Creeks. So thanks again for your time and input, and we will continue to listen. You know, certainly reach out to us, and we're happy to have further conversations and hear your input. So thank you.
Gail and Leah's contact information is in the chat if you need it. Thank you everyone for your time. We really appreciate it. We'll let everyone have a great evening.